An explosion at one of the largest oil refineries in the United States is sending shockwaves. Why? It is undoubtedly due to the current global context, as the entire world is focused on the conflict in the Middle East, where oil is a primary factor that cannot be ignored. Furthermore, many details have led people to question, was this truly an accident, or is there an arrangement by the US behind it for a larger objective? In the eyes of observers, what is noteworthy is not just the explosion itself, but its timing, a factor that is dominating almost every interpretation of this event. As the conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran continues to escalate, the already fragile global energy market has become even more vulnerable. Strategic oil transport routes, particularly in the Persian Gulf region, face constant risk of disruption. Tankers must reroute, insurance costs are soaring, and logistics chains are being stretched, all creating a chain reaction that drives up oil prices. In a system already as tense as a guitar string, any shock, even thousands of kilometers away, can amplify the impact. This is why an incident at a major refinery in Texas does not stop at the domestic level. It immediately becomes a psychological variable in the market. Investors react, expectations are adjusted, and predictions about future supply become more unstable. From this perspective, the question is no longer about a plant having an accident, but a link in the global energy system being impacted. From there, a series of more pragmatic questions arise. Why did the incident occur at this exact moment? And in a scenario where supply continues to be disrupted, oil prices remain pegged high, and the market stays volatile. Which side is truly the beneficiary? From here, two opposing hypotheses gradually form. The first direction views the event from the perspective of external impact. According to this approach, in a context of increasingly complex geopolitical competition, key energy facilities could entirely become targets. It does not necessarily have to be a direct military attack. In this day and age, more sophisticated forms of disruption, from sabotage and cyber attacks to covert operations, can all be considered part of unconventional warfare. If a large-scale oil refinery is affected, the consequences do not end with production. They spread to market psychology and confidence in the stability of the energy system. Proponents of this hypothesis tend to ask, could this be a message rather than an accident? Are energy facilities, the lifeblood of the economy, gradually becoming priority targets in pressure-seeking strategies? If so, then this explosion could be seen as a warning sign rather than an isolated accident. However, another line of reasoning goes in the opposite direction. There, some do not rule out the possibility that the incident might have been leveraged, or even in more extreme hypotheses, staged to serve larger goals. This is the type of argument that often appears in times of instability, when trust in official information is questioned and when history has recorded events whose interpretations changed over time. According to this logic, an incident at a major energy facility can create multiple effects, increasing pressure on the oil market, providing further justification for policy adjustments, or even being used as a factor in shaping public opinion regarding security threats. Those following this path often do not make definitive assertions, but they ask, is a crisis being exploited, or in a more extreme scenario, created to serve strategic calculations? Here, the issue does not lie in confirming which hypothesis is correct, but in how those hypotheses reflect a collective psychology. When an event occurs at such a sensitive time involving a key sector like energy, and when initial information remains incomplete, the emergence of different interpretations is almost inevitable. It is the parallel existence of these explanations that makes the story more complex. One side sees signs of external intervention, while the other suspects internal calculation. The intersection of both lines of reasoning perhaps lies in a core question. In a world where energy is tightly bound to power, do purely neutral accidents still exist? Or to put it another way, can an explosion like this, regardless of its true cause, avoid being pulled into larger schemes? And perhaps, at that point, the story is no longer just about an oil refinery, but about the calculations people are projecting onto it. As different interpretations begin to emerge, the story immediately recalls a familiar precedent in modern history. The public reaction following the attacks of September 11, 2001. Beyond being a globally shocking event, 9/11 is a classic example of how a major event with far-reaching impacts will almost certainly draw suspicions that go beyond official conclusions. After 9/11, alongside conclusions from the government and investigative agencies, a series of hypotheses appeared, ranging from claims of an inside job to arguments that the event was exploited to restructure global strategy. Although many hypotheses lacked empirical evidence, they persisted and spread. What is notable is not whether they were right or wrong, but that they reflected a very clear psychology. When an event is large enough, the public tends to seek an explanation that is proportionally large. Placed within the current analytical framework, the explosion in Texas, while not comparable in scale or tragedy to 9/11, shares an important commonality. It occurred in a context where its impact could extend far beyond its immediate scope. 9/11 led to profound changes in global security and military policy. Meanwhile, an incident at a major refinery at a time when the energy market is sensitive can entirely create ripple effects, at least in terms of psychology and market expectations. This intersection makes the public reaction somewhat similar. When initial information is limited and the cause is not yet clearly confirmed, that void is almost immediately filled by speculation. And within that space of speculation, the line between rational analysis and conspiracy theory sometimes becomes very thin. A cautious view suggests that the issue is not that people believe in conspiracy theories, but how they react to uncertainty. When facts are insufficient, the brain tends to complete the picture with assumptions, and these assumptions are often driven by the context, geopolitical tensions, economic interests, or memories of past events. In other words, it is no coincidence that such hypotheses emerge. They are nurtured by the very information environment and the psychology of the moment. This leads to a thought-provoking question. Are humans truly seeking the truth, or are they seeking a story plausible enough to feel they have understood something? When an event is placed in a complex context where every factor can be linked, any detail can become evidence for a hypothesis already shaped in the observer's mind. From that perspective, an information gap is not merely a lack of facts. It is an environment where competing interpretations coexist, and in that environment, a conspiracy theory does not necessarily have to be true to survive. It only needs to be plausible enough, fitting the suspicions that already existed. Returning to the explosion in Texas, as of now, the official cause has not been fully and finally confirmed. This means the space for speculation remains open. However, at this point, an important boundary needs to be recognized: the boundary between hypothesis and truth. Hypotheses can help raise questions, broaden perspectives, and even drive the search for information. But when a hypothesis begins to be accepted as truth, or when emotion dictates how facts are evaluated, the cognitive process can easily be derailed. In matters involving geopolitics, energy, or security, this derailment is not just a personal issue, but can also affect how public opinion is formed. Ultimately, what makes this explosion noteworthy is not necessarily the event itself, but how it appeared, at the right time, in the right context, and leaving too many unanswered gaps. When key facts remain unclarified, the emergence of doubt is almost inevitable. And when putting everything into the same frame, a major incident occurring amidst a tense energy market and a sensitive geopolitical environment, the question is no longer simply what happened, but was this truly just an accident? In other words, if it was not a coincidence, then what is it a consequence of? An external impact or a calculated arrangement?